Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I'm your host. Got a few stories to cover in this episode. We're going to start in Ontario, where a coalition of land developers has asked the government for tax breaks, promising to pass those tax breaks on to the end consumer. I don't know how we would ever keep track of that. In Ontario, sticking with Ontario, the health minister has announced it's going to stop testing wastewater for COVID, which is upsetting some people who need you to still be afraid. The G7 has released a statement on Venezuela. At the same time, the Venezuelan President Maduro has demanded that anyone who's saying mean things about him be put in prison. So that speaks to a good leadership. BC United has lost another member to the BC Conservatives. It turns out that last year the BC United were known as the BC Liberals. And now they want to put that on the ballot. And in Alberta, a First Nations coalition has purchased 5% of a pipeline company, which is targeted to bring in quite a bit of money. Before I get into it, I would encourage you all to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this channel with all of your socials. All right, so we'll go to Ontario, where an Ontario Development Coalition asked government for tax breaks to pass on to the home buyer. Which right away, as soon as I hear that, I know I'm suspicious. As soon as you start telling me that you want a break so that you can give it to somebody else, makes me very suspicious. So you want to put more money in your pocket, and then you're going to put the rent up another $500 on the other end. These are the same people that drive your rent up every month. These are the same people who are putting the rent through the roof. So I don't trust them in the smallest way. A coalition of Ontario developers has written to all three levels of government to ask for a reduction in taxes on new housing, saying we'll pass those taxes on to the home buyer. That makes very little sense to me. Why would you need to have a break on the taxes to pass it on to the home buyer? The home buyer is already going to get the price that they're going to get. So it seems to me that the government should be getting the businesses to pay the taxes, and then letting the person that purchases the house get a break on the taxes. So you can put those taxes into the home, and then when all of a sudden you're coming to the due date, you can say, well, we paid this much taxes on this house, and the government will then give the home buyer the break on that, and they won't put it onto their mortgage. That's a way to improve the quality of living, not to have a bunch of home developers who are all very wealthy, who are all part of massive conglomerates, more money, in my opinion. Now, you can leave me your opinion down in the comments. Do you think that we should be giving tax breaks to the builders? Do you trust that the builders will pass those breaks on to the consumer? Or do you think that they will just hide that, and put the money in their pocket and charge the consumers exactly the same amount of money that they were always going to charge them? Staying in Ontario, the health minister has decided to stop testing wastewater for COVID. And by wastewater, I mean the stuff that comes out of the toilets. So what they were doing is you would use the bathroom, and then you would flush, and then where all of that stuff gets gathered, they would go in and send in one of these people to test for the water for COVID. They test for other things as well, but they've stopped doing that for COVID. And of course, all of the far left is losing their mind over it, because they need you to be terrified of everything, and they need to take all of your tax dollars through that terror and give jobs to people who don't deserve it at salaries that are well overpriced. So when I hear them getting all bent out of shape because they're scared of COVID not being able to be tested in your poop, I think in my mind that there's more to their position than they're letting on. I think that they have more at stake, and this is the problem when you hire too many government officials. When the funding gets cut, they start to panic, and they start to say things like, oh no, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? I don't think that we should be wasting money on testing for COVID. You're either going to have it or you're not going to have it. It's not like you're going to poop into the water, and then what, they're going to say, 100 people have COVID? So what? How are they going to know? What, are they going to trace it all back to your toilet? They can even know if you pooped in that toilet? How are they going to know? If you go to the hospital will test you. Then you'll know for certain, right? But to say to me, I'm going to see what's happening in the water, well, what are you on about? Moving over to Venezuela, where the elections were held the other day, and I did a small video on it. They haven't surrendered power, as I knew they wouldn't, and they're starting to demand that they're going to start a revolutionary war, which is not a revolutionary war. It's a civil war, right? That's what that's called. However, the G7 ministers have gotten together and said some ridiculous things, right? When the G7 foreign ministers of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom, United States of America, and the High Representative of the European Union expressed our solidarity with the people of Venezuela, who peacefully exercised their right to vote in large numbers on July 28th to shape the future of their country. Now, I got to be honest with you. When I see these guys get together and make joint statements, all I hear in my mind is high school crap, where you think that because everybody is together and you're the outsider, that they're going to somehow gang up on you and you're going to be intimidated, which nobody is intimidated. It's just what runs through your mind. You think that all of a sudden you're going to follow along with the masses, right? Because if you don't, everybody's going to be mad at you, these 7 countries. But he doesn't care about those countries. So this statement is nothing. It's toothless. It's a waste of time, a waste of energy. And it makes us all look, the G7, it makes us look fickle. It makes us look compliant with his desire to steal the election and become a full-blown dictator under the moniker and under the banner of socialism, I should point out. Independent domestic and international observers report have raised serious concern about the announced results of Venezuela's presidential election and about the way the electoral process was conducted, especially regarding the irregularities and the lack of transparency in the final tabulation of the votes. It is of paramount importance that the result reflects the will of the people, but the will of the people are making themselves known right now. So you're asking for him to honor the election results, which he's already not honoring. Why did you release this statement? Who in their mind are they trying to send a signal to? That's what bothers me about all far left. Who cares what your signal is? You either do something or you don't. Signaling means nothing. It means zero. Do it or don't do it. And that's the biggest difference between the way the government leads our country and the way that the people who want to change the direction of this country behave. They're not going to talk about it. They just want to get it done. These guys with their, let's all kumbaya in a circle and we'll say this to the largest oil reserves on earth, who already is suppressing his population, knowing full well that there's absolutely nothing these 7 countries can do about it except a tersely worded statement. However, when we go over to the media page, we can see that Time magazine is reporting that Maduro wants the opposition lady jailed for 30 years. He also urges Venezuela to report protesters who question his re-election. Now imagine in your mind what we're talking about here. Are we still talking about socialism, or are we talking about communism? We're talking about Nazi? We're talking about fascism? Which one of the Marxist ideologies are the ones that put the people who disagree with you in prison? I'll answer that question for you. All of them. That's the issue with the far left, right? When you don't agree with them, they can't handle it. They lose their minds. And CNN is reporting that Maduro warns he will call for a new revolution if forced by North American imperialism. See, because now all of a sudden he needs to start to say the communist words, right? Revolution, socialism, imperialism. I got a news flash for you. It might be that corporations make a little bit of money, but when your people are living in abject poverty, that's not called imperialism. That's called bad management of your country. And stop trying to deflect. You're living fine. You are eating well. We can see the way that you look. We can see the fact that all the people around you are trained and heavily armed. However, the other people are just desperate and want to get about their life. They just want to go about their day, right? So why can't you just get out of the way and let them try something new? That goes for any of them where the population is against them. It's ridiculous. You call it socialism, and yet it turns out to be tyranny. Going over to British Columbia, Teresa Watt, who is a sitting member of the Legislative Assembly, is the 4th member of BC United to leave that party and go with the BC Conservatives. So I did a little bit of looking, and you can see in this article here that the BC United leader, Kevin Falcon, has lost his 4th member. This lady has been in a member of the Legislative Assembly since 2013. So she's already a sitting member of Richmond North. And she has elected to go over to BC Conservative. So I did a little bit further down in the article. You can see where it says BC Conservative leader John Rudstad left and BC United leader Kevin Falcon Wright were working on a deal to avoid vote splitting in the upcoming provincial election. But they're not going to be splitting any votes because BC United was last year known as BC Liberals, and they kicked out this Rudstad fella. Rudstad was himself booted out of BC United, then known as Liberals, in 2022 for questioning the science behind climate change, and sat as the only Conservative MLA for months before the wave of defections over the last year. So clearly what we see here is a switch, a shift in the way viewers are and people are looking. Now, this lady who just the recent defection is listening to the people that are voting for her. She sees the way the wind is blowing. And she says, well, you know what? Okay, if all of the people have decided that the policies of the governments are not working and that they feel that it's time for a change, let me change with them. And then they can elect me and I will simply have that different kind of a politic, which of course is the problem with all politicians, right? You have to, at least when you look at a politician like, well, you know, any of a number of them that the whole world calls terrible people, you can see that they're at least being honest and direct, that they say with definitiveness what they are doing. So when they vary from that, you can say, well, you said this in no uncertain terms. Why are you moving from this? For example, if Pierre Poilievre gets elected and all of a sudden doesn't take out the carbon tax, who can say, how could he say anything other than the fact that he, you know, that would be pure BS, right? So we know for with the fact where he stands, which is a great way to have leadership, right? You don't want to be questioning where they're running. Look at the situations that we got running around this world right now. There's no certainty in any of the countries. The economy is moving around like it's on the back of a 4x4. It's just not a healthy way to have the government. So what I think is most entertaining is now that the BC Conservative has some momentum, all of a sudden they want the guy back in the party. All of a sudden they're like, oh, you come back. Wait a minute. We changed our position. Did you change your position on the environment? Did you start to agree with his position? In which case, shouldn't you just go over to his party? I don't know super duper a lot about British Columbia politics. I mean, I do understand that everywhere you look at the municipal and the provincial level and where they have a far left government, things are falling to pieces. So that is what I want you to take away from this. That is the thing that you need to understand. This individual switched because the voters in her neighborhood, she's getting the vibe, the undercurrent that they are moving over to conservative values. And so she did as well in an effort to maintain her position. And I don't blame her. Maybe we'll finally get some common sense in all of the governments. Okay, so I like to save the best for last, and I believe I've done that in this episode. Out west, they have a lot of pipeline, and one of the companies that run that pipeline is called TC Energy, and it has sold a 5% share to the pipeline that's running over Western Canada, at least the pipeline, a couple of them that are mentioned, carrying natural gas, a 5% share to First Nations consortium of 72 communities. TC Energy Corporation is pleased to announce an equity interest purchase agreement with First Nations owned investment partners for a minority equity interest of 5.3% in the NGTL system and the Foothills pipeline assets for a gross purchase price of $1 billion. The agreement is backed by the Alberta First Nations Opportunity Corporation and was negotiated by a consortium committee representing specific Indigenous communities across Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan. This results in an implied enterprise value of approximately $1.65 billion, inclusive of the proportional share of the partnership's assets collective debt. The historic partnership will enable up to 72 communities closest to the partnership assets to become equity owners in the 25,000 kilometer highly integrated network of natural gas infrastructure assets spanning Western Canada. Investments in the critical energy assets delivers access to long-term revenue sources that will help create meaningful change for Indigenous communities. First Nations ownership is the pathway to a more prosperous nation. As owners, First Nations communities will have resources to invest for the future and the greater economic sovereignty. The Alberta First Nations Opportunities Corporation is leading the world with its innovative approach to supporting First Nations economic opportunity. TC Energy is proud to be part of this historic agreement, said the fellow who was in charge. Now, I got to be honest with you. I think that this is an amazing deal. I think that the First Nations out there need to all copy this. They need to all say to themselves, hey, listen, can't beat them. You might as well join them. Because if by joining them, you'll start to get fat, you know what I mean? You'll start to get a lot of money. This company, TC Energy, made a announcement today that it was paying out for this quarter 98 cents a share to their shareholders. 98 cents. That's how much money they made in the last quarter. They made $983 million in 3 months, and they paid out 98 cents a share, up from 93 cents a share from last quarter, or excuse me, from this time last year. So when your share prices and when your stock starts to increase, you're looking at a lot of money. I mean, if you had 1 million shares, that would be 980 grand, right? So if you had 1,000 shares, they'd give you almost $1,000. Now, when you're looking at 5%, you're not talking about maybe even the whole system, but you are talking about an enormous amount of money that is going to come back the other way after paying off their loan dividends. That is going to go into their community. They won't have to wait for handouts from the Ottawa government. They won't have to wait for handouts in any way, shape, or form. They'll be able to say, look, this band brought in $1 million last year, so let's build 4 or 5 of our own houses and see how where that takes us. Or more importantly, let's send 4 or 5 of our people to school so that they can get the education and then come back to the band and either teach the next generation of how to do something or provide that service to the region. Like many of the bands might need a doctor outside of their traditional medicines, as an example, or maybe a tech savvy individual so that they could, bring in the internet and teach children e-commerce, anything of the nature. As long as they got the funds, what does it matter, right? That's the point that I'm trying to make. It's amazing how much money, how much things will open doors when you got quid. You know what I mean? And I believe that this is where many of the First Nations individuals have taken the wrong turn. They want to separate themselves. They want to keep themselves apart. But really, they should dive right in face first and say, listen, we have gold. We want 75% of any of this and that and the other, but you can have the rest of it. We got oil buried down underneath us, no problem at all. You're going to build a pipeline. How much is we getting out of it? Because that's really the way that the path forward. That's how they're going to take control and resolve many of the issues that we hear them talking about. I'm not telling you that they shouldn't pursue those avenues out of Ottawa as well. But how can they trust a government like the Liberal government that we currently have? How can you trust that when they say one thing and do another all day long, all day and all night? All right, I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you all for listening. I'll talk to you next time.